Okay, hello. I am going to be doing a quick review of Last of Us Season 2, which I just finished watching literally 5 minutes ago. I'm a little late to the party, but I will review it and then talk about how I feel about that ending as well as just the major plot points within this season. So just know there will be spoilers in this video, so don't watch this if you haven't seen Season 2. And just for some context, I have not played the video game, so if anyone is watching this video that has played the games, it would be cool if you would enlighten me on some of the deviations they make within this show, specifically when talking about some of my criticisms of this second season, which I think is flawed but still pretty good. But I'm curious to see if the issues I have are deviations from the game or if they are within the source material. And just to get upfront about how I feel about this season, I think it was pretty solid, but the middle section is really lacking. The first two episodes, which I talk about more in depth in a video that came out like a month or two ago, are incredible and do a great job of establishing what this season is going to be about, which is exploring this idea of cyclical violence and whether or not Ellie will be breaking this cycle of constant revenge. These ideas built upon the morally gray conclusion to the season 1 finale I thought was going to lead to a really, really intriguing and morally ambiguous season that would dive into a lot of what I like so much about this series. And we do get some of that within this season, specifically in the final 2 episodes, but I think it drags its feet quite a bit in the middle section, specifically episodes 3 to 5 I found to be quite weak. Because that second episode is such a gut punch and just such a powerhouse of episode, you expect that momentum to be carried on into episode 3, but the show ends up twiddling its thumbs quite a bit. And one of the reasons I think they're doing this is because they want to maintain the charm of the first season. The best part of the first season was Bella Ramsey and Pedro Pascal's chemistry and them just walking along and just having fun and having good banter. And that is recreated within Bella Ramsey and Isabel Merced's relationship, which is good, but I don't think is essential to what is actually going on at the core of this season. It feels out of place tonally. This second season is quite devastating and far more emotionally powerful than the first season, which was already pretty powerful emotionally. I mean, this is a show about an apocalypse, so it is always going to be pretty devastating. But there are several scenes within season 2 that are shots to the heart, really, really emotionally powerful. And so while I do like Merced and Ramsey's chemistry, it does feel like they're not really working at the right tone or the right register that this season needs. I like both of their performances, but having them just kind of hang out and, banter while riding horses for the middle section of this season really does let a lot of gas out of the tank, especially because of what's going on with Ellie. And this is my main criticism of Bella Ramsey's performance, which I think is for the most part really, really great, but has a couple of issues, and this is one of them. In my opinion, the second episode should lead to Ellie completely changing in a sense and snapping and being fueled by anger and vengeance, so much so that she becomes obsessed. And that does happen later on in the season, but that incessant thirst for vengeance that she has should make this journey feel a lot more propulsive, like they're desperate to get to Seattle. But there's a lot of meandering around and it's very lackadaisical in its pace, and I just think that really, really weakens this entire season. There's also a couple moments that feel like they're just having plot for the sake of plot. This also might be a product of this being the second game split into multiple seasons. So some of these things that feel like loose threads right now could end up being satisfied within the third season or maybe even the fourth. But right now, the whole cult thing doesn't seem like it's affecting the plot at all. And every time it went to that, I found myself losing interest. Same with whatever was going on with Jeffrey Wright's character. That has nothing to do with Jeffrey Wright, who is just immediately captivating when he's on screen, like he always is in everything he's in. But he felt so irrelevant within the grander scheme of this season, especially because they're providing him with this backstory that is not necessary at all. I really don't know what they're getting at with his character, who just kind of feels like this side character that doesn't need to be fleshed out at all, but is getting a couple of scenes within this season where you're really trying to get to the core of who this guy is, and I'm not sure why they're doing that. Again, maybe this is because he will be a big player in season 3, but for now it just feels like a loose thread that they needed to tighten up. And a lot of the action within the middle section doesn't have a lot of stakes to it. It feels like action simply because there's nothing else going on within the show that is remotely intriguing in the middle section, besides the romance between Ellie and Dina, but even that is not super captivating, especially when you compare it to what is going on with Joel and Ellie. Which leads me into episode 6, one of my favorite of the entire season, that is flashbacks of all of Ellie's birthdays and her and Joel just hanging out. It really reminded me that this is the core of this show, and any time that it tended to deviate away from this relationship or the ramifications of the aftermath of this relationship, it kind of lost my interest a little bit. Don't get me wrong, I like Isabella Merced in this. I even think Catherine O'Hara is pretty good. Young Manzino doesn't get a lot to do until the final episode, but a lot of these side characters are just not very interesting when compared to the central plot of Ellie trying to kill Abby, which leads me to another slight issue I have with this, which is that Caitlin Dever is just not in this nearly enough. She's really, really great as Abby, just like an absolute freight train anytime she shows up on screen. But she's only in 2 or 3 episodes, and even in those episodes, she's not in it too much. Once again, this could be because they're saving her for season 3, which seems to be more centered around her, but it's still somewhat dissatisfying for a season that is centered entirely around Ellie trying to get to Abby, and so abruptly once they have their final confrontation, which is also really the only moment that Dever and Ramsey are together on screen. I think Ramsey is hit or miss in this season, not as good as she was in the first season, but has some really, really powerful moments, specifically in the final 2 episodes. The performances here are all pretty solid, even if some of the writing is a little bit weak. And technically speaking, this show still looks incredibly gorgeous. A couple of shots that I feel look a little bit too artificial, especially whenever they're in Seattle, but for the most part, it's just a really captivating, gorgeous looking show. It really captures both the beauty and the terror of this desolate landscape within this apocalypse. And while I have been heavily criticizing the middle section of this season, the bookends of it are really great. Like I said, the first 2 episodes are incredible and do a great job of setting this season up. And then the final 2.5 episodes are really, really great as well once you start to get to the core of Ellie's vengeance. And the show explores a lot of moral quandaries about vengeance and whether or not Ellie deserves this vengeance and whether or not the way she's going about obtaining this vengeance is right or wrong. And stuff that gets this morally gray tends to get a little bit murky with exactly what it's trying to get across. But Last of Us does a great job of asking questions and never providing satisfying answers. It's one of the most thought-provoking shows of the past few years. And the fact that everyone seems to have a different opinion about Ellie and Joel and Abby as characters does mean that the show is doing what it wants to do. I personally found them to be all incredibly flawed characters that definitely suffer from the exact same affliction of being way too spontaneous, acting off their emotions rather than exploring what they're going through logically, which Ellie does multiple times within this season. That makes her kind of a frustrating character, but also a very relatable one. I think episode 6 does a great job of making her incredibly likable again. Belly Ramsey has a really charming performance, and that episode really gets to the root of what makes the show so great, which is that chemistry between Pedro and Bella. The lack of Pedro isn't really felt that much here besides the middle section. He's only in a couple episodes, but within all those episodes, he is in a lot of profoundly affecting scenes and delivers a more emotional, contemplative performance as Joel than he did in the first season. And overall, I do find the first season of Last of Us to be a little bit better simply because it's more consistent than season 2, but season 2 has a lot of the high highs that the first season had. And while it does lose me in the middle, it does really start to pick up in the final couple episodes and reach an incredible conclusion. This does kind of feel like half of a story, a lot of loose ends, a lot of threads that have not really been fully satisfied. But it also seems to be a good decision to split the second game into a couple of seasons, because there's a lot going on here, and for the most part I think they stuck the landing in terms of how they splice it up. This ending is somewhat unsatisfying, but intentionally so, and really gets me excited for whatever is going to go on in season 3. Overall, I would rate this season a 3.5 out of 5. A few flaws, but for the most part, really, really great television. I think I could like it a little bit more if season 3 comes out and it satisfies a lot of the issues I have with this season. But for now, I just think it's pretty good. And that's really all I have to say about Last of Us. I got a couple of movie reviews coming out pretty soon. The first one being Bring Her Back, as well as Mountainhead, the Jesse Armstrong movie that just premiered on HBO. And hopefully I will be doing a review, or at least a video, about The Rehearsal. I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to go about that because there's a lot to say about that show. But I do want to talk about it, so I will be doing that at some point. But that's really all I got. So go watch Last of Us and tell me what you think. And yeah, that's it. Goodbye.